Thank you. So, thank you, Kevin, and welcome. It was interesting, whenever I go and do a chat somewhere, whether it's a city or a country, I try and find out some interesting facts. Well, there are a huge amount relative to this area, but I thought I'm going to give you something that you're not going to find in any history books. You'll ever find it now or in the future, but it is relevant to me. Swansea, and just down the road, is where I had my first ever kiss. Age 17, I was on a geology field trip, and it was a guy who went on to work as a prison officer. I'm not sure if there's a relation to what I was doing just before I took this role on, but anyway, it won't be laid down in history. So thank you for the warm welcome. When I was preparing, Barbara said to me, you know, there's been some important legislation that has been laid down, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act of 2015. And I was having a look at it, reading it in depth, and actually one of the main messages from that act is that sustainability has to be at the heart of decision making. Well, my summary of employee engagement and why it matters is that the heart, engagement, is all about putting the heart in sustainability. So it's about people and it's about leadership. So I've got to check which slides are coming up. Right, so for those of you who don't know about Engage for Success, it was a movement that started, it was set up by UK government about 10 years ago. A report to government was produced by David McLeod and Nita Clark. It proved the case as to why employee engagement was so important, not only to drive the UK economy, but to make sure that employees felt that they had a place and they felt fulfilled in life. I say in life because it's not just about the workplace, really important. And all of the research that got produced is now being used. It's built around some 4 enablers, which I will touch on in just a moment. There has since that report been a number of other good case studies done, different reports to government that are now used across all the devolved governments as well as central. So one is on productivity, the other is on good work, and the other is around mental health. There are lots of other pieces of legislation and reports, but if you only look at 3 things that have a really close alignment with employee engagement, please look at them: good work, productivity, and thrive at work, mental health. One of the critical elements around employee engagement is that employees are human beings. This sounds really stupid and really trite, but employees are human beings. Human beings have emotions. And actually, the one thing that whether you are a first-line manager, whether you are a leader of a big organisation, it doesn't matter which sector you are in, actually being able to relate to your own emotion and relate to the emotion of those who work with you and for you is critical. And all of the work that the movement does helps connect people with emotion and make sure that it unleashes the best in each other. The report to government was produced in well, it was about 8 years ago. And one of the critical factors that came out from it is that 64% of employees, generally, from those who were studied, said they had more to offer. And that's more to offer at work, more to offer to their team, more to offer to the community. And that sense of community is really important because community is not just about a common workplace. The links around employee engagement are also proven. There are strong links that suggest that profit can increase double. Now that's great for organisations that are share price driven or generally retail or manufacturer driven, because you can actually directly correlate the increase in revenue to employee engagement. But what about the SME market or the employee-owned market? What is the issue for them? That's about productivity rather than sales growth. So one of the things we're going to be focusing in on over the next few years is how we capture the SME and employee-owned market. It's proven that customer satisfaction can increase by 12% if employee satisfaction is high. Productivity increases by 59% if employee engagement is high. People feel that they can be 5% more creative and innovative if employee engagement is high. Turnover is lower by 40% if engagement is high. And the lower the employee engagement scores are, generally, there are 62% more accidents in the workplace. So the evidence is really strong as to why employee engagement matters. So what is employee engagement? You will have seen, for those of you who are involved in the movement, the definition from the work of David MacLeod and Nita Clark. But I'm going to summarise it in the bottom statement. It's all about leadership of our people and culture. You cannot lead people without looking at the environment that they work in. And a lot of the work that we will be doing over the next few years, now that we are incorporated with the CIPD, is to work more closely with organisations such as Be the Business and the Royal Society of Arts, who have produced the Good Work and Productivity Guides. We'll be working more closely with Lord Stevenson and Paul Farmer from Mind around mental health activities and the workplace. So the 4 enablers, very briefly. Oh, they're coming up one by one. Okay, so the first is about creating a strategic narrative. Now, these 4 enablers are the basics. Any organisation, big, small, doesn't matter which sector, making sure that these 4 enablers are embedded in your organisation are really important. Making sure that leaders and managers and staff understand what the narrative is of your organisation. They connect with the sense of purpose and they can tell the sense of purpose, not just have leaders sit and showcase in a very comms cascade fashion what the sense of purpose is. Making sure that we've got engaging managers, that they are engaging in personality, in style, in tone of voice, in language that they are using, so that the words that they use are relating to the people who are in the room with them. So what is going to be relevant in a government department is going to be different from what's relevant in a manufacturing or retail sector, for example. That there is an employee voice, and I am a great believer that employee voice needs more work across all sectors and all industries. Making sure that we are doing more to drive the employee voice around what is working and not working in an organisation, about what is connecting with the communities that you are working in. Our employees, people we work with and partners and agencies we work with, will give you more evidence around what needs to improve than most management consultants working in our organisations do. And then lastly, having organisational integrity. You know, walking the walk and talking the talk and walking the talk, all 3 of them, are really important. How many times have you seen staff surveys in your organisation that give you some evidence around employee engagement is good or bad, and there's a beautiful action plan that's produced at the end of it, and then all of you are sitting around with your team, because there's always a team meeting discussing it, and you're saying, hang on a second, that's not right. Or it's way lower than I thought it was going to be, or higher than I thought it was going to be, because your gut, your intuition tells you what's right or wrong. So making sure that organisational integrity, and we have the mechanisms and systems in place to release the organisational integrity, and making sure we have the leadership behaviours and practices to support it so that there is no say and do gap. It's really interesting. We have many debates with lots of businesses around whether employee engagement is transactional and transformational. And I cannot tell you how angry I get when I hear organisations say, but we have a staff survey and we have a really good action plan around a staff survey. You know what? That's just transactional. Anyone can do that. Anyone can do it. But what it usually leads to is something trite like, oh, there's a problem in X building in X city, and if we paint the ladies' toilet on the 3rd floor, everything's going to be fine. The action plans are that silly. Actually, it needs to be more transformational. So that has to be built on a deep belief that things can change. Now, staff keep filling in the surveys. Sometimes they see action, sometimes they don't. But leaders have to believe that they are capable and that they want to make change happen. Surveys are not the start and end of it. And that last sentence, a belief that our people are the solution and not the problem, particularly when staff surveys and action plans are involved, is something that needs more work. And again, we'll be working as a movement on with different organisations across different sectors to make sure that that's embedded. The movement itself has a number of resources. All of these things are available freely on the website. We are self-funded. We only generate money from sponsorships. This is not a call for sponsorship or donations, by the way, but it is something that actually all the people that do help us, all the partner organisations, they help us, such as the business schools, research houses, as well as consultancies and organisations, provide evidence that helps you create a better conversation within your own organisations. So there are a number of thought and action groups. Some of them are topic, some of them are region, and some of them are sector. There's a number of studies which are coming out. And for those of you who want to know more, go onto the website or do talk to the EFRS Wales team, and they can direct you to the nearest thought and action groups or ones that are relevant to your business, your sector, and you can get involved. There is a radio show. We do a podcast and a radio show every Monday, and it's downloadable. Different subjects, whether it's a new research paper or whether it's a thought leadership piece, or it's something to help upskill us as engagement practitioners. So do have a look at that. And then lastly, the evidence. The evidence is built to help you persuade your organisations to take this seriously, if they are not already. And then the last thing is there is an Engage for Success annual conference which is happening the 10th of September. It's happening, unfortunately, in the southeast, so it's going to be at the QE2 in Westminster, but we are going to look at actually regionalising some of our conferences so that we have better coverage and representation of all of the UK. My contact details are up there. You will get a copy of it. We are happy to hear from anybody, whether it's a poke in the eye to say you're doing something wrong and I've got a suggestion on how you can do it differently, or whether it's a call for help because you need help getting your organisations to take employee engagement seriously. Thank you. Oh, questions? I think I've got to stay here because we're going for questions.
So, first question for Faran. If you would change one thing in your engagement journey, what would it be?
So I'm going to be cheeky and answer it in two ways. So the first is from a governance and framework perspective. Too many organisations rely on staff surveys as their start and end point on employee engagement, and therefore it absolves lots of leaders from taking responsibility, and it absolves employees from their role in driving employee engagement, from connecting with it. So I would change the way that surveys are both, the question sets are put together, analysed, and I would introduce a framework which is not a number on a door, not target-led. So it's not saying, you know, if I score X, Y, and Z on a survey, I'm really good or I'm really bad. Because you know what, employee engagement is a relative thing. Everybody starts from somewhere, and the main thing on employee engagement is that you are moving positively forward. And that's my big bugbear. So that's the framework governance thing. The other piece would be that employee engagement is not just owned by leaders or employees or communities or partners. It's owned by everybody, and it needs to be taken seriously by everybody. And unfortunately, it's become an HR thing, not downrating HR communities for being the owners of employee engagement, but actually it's a business issue that needs to be addressed. So we need to move it over and above the HR agenda into a business agenda.
I'll answer one question quickly that's on there. Yes, the slides will be available
Yes.
at the end of the sessions.
It builds on what Faran was just saying.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your incorporation of Engage for Success and CIPD?
Yeah, so the question is about Engage for Success and incorporating in CIPD. So we incorporated, when I joined, I incorporated Engage for Success with CIPD for a few reasons. The first is to make sure that we were financially stable, that we could leverage the mechanisms and the resources freely available through the CIPD. Peter Cheese is our chairman of the board for Engage for Success, and he is also CEO for CIPD. And Professor Carey Cooper, who you know from the health and wellbeing space, is the chairman for CIPD. We have gone through a period of transition. Nothing has fallen over, but more can be done. So coming out shortly over the next 2 weeks, there will be a video that Peter and I have made which talks about the incorporation and what it means for both parties, Engage for Success and CIPD. It talks about how we can leverage each other's opportunities of working together. And I will repeat, they are on the good work agenda, they are on productivity, and there is something in the health, wellbeing, social inclusion space. Haven't come up with a snazzy title for it yet, but hold on to your hats. Within 2 weeks, I have to come up with a title for it. So 3 core areas that we will be working together with CIPD. It does not take away all of the other stuff that Engage for Success does. It does talk about how we will remain Engage for Success, a distinct brand entity with assets away from CIPD. There is no kind of ownership of authority or governance. I report directly into Peter. He and I make a decision and we make it happen. So there's no, CIPD don't win over any decision making over Engage for Success, neither does Engage for Success win over CIPD.
Thank you. Can you please say a little bit more about importance of organisational values in engaging employees?
Yeah, so the question's around organisational values and engaging employees. So this is around, for me, this is around employee voice. So many organisations, if I go back 10 years ago, the creation of mission, vision and values was all the big rage at the time and still continues to some extent, particularly with the big consultancies. But what happened is lots of people sat in a room with some consultants and came up with some values and then kind of pumped it out through the organisation. And you kind of got told, you will act with integrity, you will be connected, you will be part of teamwork and all these lovely words. The problem is employees said, but I don't know actually what that means for me. And so, and actually if you speak to the unions, TUC, etc., they will tell you that actually driving the employee voice up and helping them leverage their input to creating values is really important. So this is where having the right mechanisms for driving the employee voice to create the values becomes important. And I don't just mean do a survey or get them to fill in a questionnaire, but live streaming, focus groups, using Twitter, using social media to get the employee feedback is really important. And then not dismissing the words that they have used. So I'll give you one quick example, I'm conscious of time. At the Ministry of Justice, one of the oldest departments in terms of heritage and old thinking, led by judiciary in the civil service. And they wanted me to, I volunteered because no one else was doing it, to come up with some values for the whole of MOJ, which had to impact the judiciary, who we didn't own. We paid for them, but we didn't own them. A very old, century-old system. And so what we said is, well, fine, we'll ask 75,000 employees. And we did it over 6 months, and we took our time. And one of the words is purpose, humanity, openness, and trust were the ones that they came up with. But the word humanity is one that all of the judges said, we can't sign up for that. The minister said, well, no way can we sign up with being humane. I'm sitting there thinking, hang on a second. Now, but actually the Perm Sec, brave as he is, said, you know what, I kind of like it. I like it because one, it's staff language, it's what they're saying. We want to be treated with humanity in the same way that we would be treated at home or with our loved ones or with our hobbies and social networks. So why don't we just go for it? And actually we incorporated it, and it's the one that everybody has said, actually, I now connect with it. Judges are now saying, I now connect with it. It helps us deal with citizens of the UK as we take them through the justice system. So there's a bit of tenacity in getting it through, but actually it's a big driver of employee engagement if you involve them using all of the tools that are available, not just the ones that we've been told we should use. Any more?
Well, I steal the mic.
Okay. Right. Wendy Edwards from PwC is our link person with Leslie Richards, who is head of CIPD Wales. We seek to build on collaboration whilst maintaining our independence of each other too. Sorry.
Yeah, I just want you to explain what we're doing in Wales.
Oh.
Wendy's there.
Where's Wendy? Hello. Right. So,
Let people see who you are.
yeah.
So she's our important link person.
Yes.
Thank you, Wendy.
It's really interesting. When we incorporated, it's fair to say there were one or two either cities or kind of counties or regions, both within CIPD community and Engage for Success community, and with all the partners and communities that you're working with, that were really confused about this collaboration of working. And you know, we've learned from that. We've learned some of the successes and some of the failures. And we're now, over the next few weeks, with the video that Peter and I are doing, we'll be talking about some of those successes and failures and what we've learned and how we're going to change things for a more positive future. We are working with partner organisations. PwC is one of them, but we have other organisations as well, both through the CIPD and Engage Sex communities.
Another one?
Yep.
We're 10 years into engagement going mainstream, but levels are still low. What needs to be done to really increase engagement across Wales?
Right, so actually I'm going to take it back to this first slide where I spoke about the Future Generations Act. So actually this is an opportunity which talks about engagement at a more systemic purpose, at a more commercial level, rather than just saying it's something that HR do or it's something that engagement specialists do. Actually, it's a business issue. It is a community issue. And engagement is not just about organisations. It is about creating communities of people working together for a more sustainable future. So I think that having that focus, joining up the engagement agenda with the Future Generations one, is a way that I would do it if I were in Wales and leading it in Wales.
Thank you. So we've got time for 2 more questions from the room. There's a roving mic. Oh, I knew there'd be someone.
Hello there, thank you. That was a really interesting talk, Faran. I just wondered, there's been talk recently about the benefits of 4-day working week in terms of how it's going to improve employee engagement. I just wondered what your thoughts were and whether you're involved within Engage for Success on it.
Yeah, so actually Peter and I were just talking about this the other day. So we are going to be setting up a thought and action group with CIPD where we can talk about flexible working and social mobility as well, because that's another big angle, which is also about making the workplace more accessible. So we, but I want to take a step back, because actually to make whatever flexible working is, whether it's a 4-day working week or making the workplace more accessible for whether it's carers or return to workers, etc., you have to influence policy. And so that's where the CIPD piece comes in. We can leverage through voice and screaming a lot and shouting a lot and getting ourselves known as Engage for Success, but the people who can influence government policy is the CIPD. So we're linking up with them, and we're also linking up with the other influencing bodies in the engagement space across the other 5 continents, and with the other big HR houses like SHRM.
Thank you very much.
Do we have anyone else in the room? Oh, I'm going to get fit to this.
you. I've just seen this question on Twitter, but it's one of my bugbears, so I'm going to pose it. But I've just seen someone post it as well. How realistic is it to impose values on multifaceted organisations, diverse organisations and diverse individuals? Are we not better to frame it around working principles and as such behaviours from which individuals can come at those behaviours from any value that is important to them and they so choose, rather than this fixation with what is largely meaningless nominalisations on the bottom of a business card?
Yeah, yeah. I'll summarise it by saying I agree. That's a personal agreement, let me say. So the problem with values is it has been turned into this brand thing where you get lots of banners and these lovely place cards that get put down and thank you notes. I think they're good. You know, they're good. They have a sense and they have a purpose. But they don't work everywhere for all types of organisations with all types of different leaders, and certainly for all types of different workforces. So if I have a look at organisations I've worked in and that I've consulted in, you know, the workforce are wide and varied. You've got different religions, you've got different sexual orientations, you've got different age ranges, you've got different lengths of experience in the workplace. What is going to drive one person is not going to drive another one. And so I think it is having the right complement of things that is important, one of which may be values. But actually, if you're addressing values, you cannot ignore two other things. The first is behaviours, and that's behaviours not just of leaders. I see lots of leadership development programmes spurring off from these values things. But actually, it's also behaviours within the workplace. Call it culture, call it environment, call it whatever you want, but making sure that behaviours are addressed in the workplace. And the second is attitude. Attitude is not a word that we often talk about, but making sure that people come to work with the right attitude, that they feel fulfilled, that if they have the wrong attitude as they rock up at work because something's happened, they've burnt the toast, the dog's not well, etc., that they are able to freely say, you know what, I've had a really bad night. I've been up all night with my little one who's not been well. And actually create an environment that says it's okay. We're not going to say, oh, we'll dock 5 minutes off you because you've been talking about your home life, etc. It's a very real world, and making sure that leaders have the right attitude to say, it's okay because we have a real world environment that we're living in.
Follow up to that one. You talk about behaviours, but we've just recently rewritten our values from the ground up. And what we're doing now is looking at how those values shape the behaviours, and
Yeah.
we're going to be workshopping with staff to develop the behaviours. So do you not think that values are those things that kind of are a precursor to behaviours, or are they kind of not linked?
You know what, I could probably quote you 20 different theories on it, and we'll all walk out with about 100 different versions of it. I'm going to take a slightly different approach, which is you have to do both. Don't do one without the other, and I don't really care which way round.
So I'm probably going to row and we'll be shouting at now. One last question, and
Okay.
I have to stop. What initial practical steps can be taken to encourage employee voice?
I'm not sure who's going to love or hate me for saying this. The first is make unions your friend. Those of you that are unionised organisations, they will love it and they will love you for it. So, but a practical step under the table, make sure you carry your unions with you. And the other one is use social media. Use social media, you know, in all of its guises. So whether it is Twitter to capture or WhatsApp groups to capture your more technology savvy. Note I did not say young people, technology savvy. And then make sure that you have got as wide a spread of communication vehicles as possible. And when I say communication vehicles, I really don't mean downward cascades, because I have a problem when it becomes owned by a comms department who have traditional methods and channels of communicating things in an organisation. So making sure as many communication vehicles as possible. And then the last thing is tell everybody you are doing it. Just tell everybody, everywhere you go, just say this is what we're going to do. Because the more you can get the message out, the more people will come to you and it doesn't feel so hard to get done.
Can you all join me saying thank you to Faran? Thank you very much.